Welcome to On the Issues. I'm Irma Lauder, Chair of the Board of Selectmen for Hingham. And today my guests on the show are John Walsh, Vice President of Aquarian, and Ronit Goldstein, who is customer service and everything else. First, we'll talk a little bit about upcoming town meeting. And hopefully you all have gotten your warrant in the mail. Please read it before you come to town meeting. And this year, the warrant is a labor of love between all the snowstorms that happen and all the committees that feed first into the Board of Selectmen. And then after we hear the warrant articles, they go to advisory for the recommended motion. So I want to give special thanks to Betty Foley, Betty Tower, and Sharon Perfetti, who've helped us get this document out, and all the committees, the advisory committee, and my colleagues on the Board of Selectmen. It was a long year. And also, the town report is now available, and this is Betty Tower's final report. Today is her last day, and we're going to miss her tremendously after about 26 years of service to the town. And this is her baby. It's a beautiful cover. Please pick this up. They're available in Town Hall, and also they'll be available at town meeting. So today, my guests that I've invited, we're going to talk about water restrictions. It's about that time of the year, and we've had a bountiful snow, which may lead people to believe we should have no water problems. We decided to do this show to educate everyone on how water restrictions happen and all of the interesting pieces that feed into determining when we put restrictions on and also why we do that. So let's start. And there are FAQs up on the Aquarian website, and I think they're going to eventually be put on our website too, I hope. We have a series of questions, but the first thing I'm going to do is ask John and Ronit to tell us about the Hingham Hull aquifers. This is also an interesting subject that continues to come up. So I'll turn it over to you two first.
Sure. First, good morning,
Good
Irma.
morning.
Thank you for having us in. Well, regarding the aquifer in Hingham and Hull, all of the water that we supply the residents of Hingham Hull and North Cohasset comes from wells and a reservoir that are in the Weir River subbasin. And what's somewhat unique about the Weir River subbasin is that back in 2005, the State Water Resources Commission evaluated the subbasin and decided to designate it as a highly stressed basin because there are times of the year where more water is being withdrawn from the wells and the reservoirs. It's our wells, and also Norwell has some wells in the subbasin. So all of the water that's being withdrawn is greater than the amount of water that's actually entering the subbasin.
Let's talk about why is Aquarian implementing the water restriction measures?
So first, I should say the amount of water that we are authorized to withdraw from our reservoirs, from our reservoir and wells, is determined by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, or the DEP for short. And the DEP authorizes us to withdraw an amount of water each year that is equivalent to 3.51 million gallons a day. And we have been close to that limit for much of the past decade and more. In fact, in 2014, we approached 99% of that limit. So water restrictions are one of the ways one of the things we implement to ensure that we don't exceed that limit.
Can you talk about and explain what I know is a consent decree, but it's got a different terminology for the water company, like that, how that limit got set?
Well, it's called the 3.51 million gallon a day limit. That is a registration limit. So in the state of Massachusetts, water utilities either have a registration limit or a permit limit. We have a registration limit, and those limits were set in the mid-'80s. It was when the DEP started to regulate and monitor the amount of water that was withdrawn from the environment. They looked at several years worth of withdrawal data for each utility, and based on that data set those registration limits.
And what's interesting, when you compare Hingham today and in the 80s, it's a very different town.
Mm-hmm.
We've had tremendous growth, both in residential and in commercial, and certainly in all the restaurants in town. I can understand why we'd be bumping right up against that limit.
Yes.
Let's talk about the restrictions and why you implement them and why it may seem that we have plenty of water and yet we're implementing restrictions, which kind of backs right into what you were just talking about.
Yeah, so one of the questions that's come up as we've been communicating with folks over the last month and a half about the restrictions is with the snowfall, the record snowfall this past winter, why would there be restrictions? Well, the record snowfall doesn't change the amount that DEP authorizes us to withdraw from the environment. So regardless of the amount of snowfall, we have to adhere to that same limit each year.
How many other communities have water restrictions? And can you comment on what they look like? Are they similar to what you implement here, or are they different?
I can speak to that.
Sure.
I can speak to information from the DEP website from last year as of the end of August. So in Massachusetts, there were 118 communities that had water restrictions. And out of that 118, 108 were mandatory and 10 were voluntary. And out of that, 63 were instituted as early as May 1st. So
it's almost half,
yes.
because we have 351 cities and towns. And that's an amazing number. And I believe you shared with me the DEP updates their website in May of every year. And that's why we're looking at the data from 2014. And
The summertime water restriction, that season has not, begins in May. So I believe it's when DEP will start updating it for 2015, their website.
when can it's assuming people can see their lawn finally.
We hope.
We hope. When can I water my lawn? And when can we begin doing that?
So the water, I'm going to read this so that we get it very clear to the public. The water restrictions have been established pursuant to Aquarion's rules and regulations as approved by the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities. The restrictions apply only to irrigation systems and hose and sprinklers. Customers with odd number street addresses may only water on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and those with even number street addresses may only water on Wednesdays and Sundays. And on these assigned days, customers are allowed to water before 10 a.m. and after 6 p.m. when evaporation losses will be minimized and more water goes to the plant's roots. So,
Thank you. And one of the reasons we're doing this on TV for everyone is these tapes will play over and over again. So if you catch little bits here and there, plus my guests are so gracious about adding information to what you're going to be reading on the website. So this is a much better way to communicate with everybody in Hingham, because we all want green lawns, but Mother Nature has really played a role here. Can you talk about handheld watering? Because that is a big controversy. What does that mean?
I'm going to say it very clearly that handheld watering is allowed at any time. And this includes filling your swimming pool, your kiddie pool, and washing your car. And those are very common questions that people ask. So handheld watering of your garden and lawn is allowed at any time.
And as I recall, you all are selling the rain barrels?
We have a vendor with the Great American Rain Barrel Company. They're out of just outside of Boston. and Roslindale, I believe, and they produce a great product, and we just help promote it for them and provide the venue at our open house on May 9th. So the ordering is available through the Aquarian website. If you click on the rainbow icon, and the ordering is through May 1st at 5 o'clock, and I'll do the pitch. It's $75 versus about $120 in the retail stores, so.
Oh, that's a very
great
good break.
product.
Do you know how many people in Hingham, or how are many of our citizens taking advantage of this?
I can speak to last year's orders. There were close to 100. So, and there's, I think, a huge
pretty good.
awareness, among the residents, so.
Because I do know that a friend of ours has a couple of those rain barrels, and it really helps with the cost of water that she's able to have. She has one of the nicest gardens around, and it's basically the rain barrels that have helped. So,
That's nice to hear.
how about, let's talk about swimming pools, which are more and more, we're seeing them in Hingham, and then washing vehicles.
Yep, filling your swimming pool and washing your vehicle is allowed at any time. I mean, people typically will use a hose or a handheld device, so that is allowed.
Dee, a question about wells. And I know you all are working with the Water Supply Committee as well. Because
Yes.
all of this is going to be around no matter who owns the company, and we need to make sure that people understand that. All of the issues that John and Ronit are speaking to and are helping us with are still going to be around, regardless of who owns the company. How do people communicate they have wells? And is there anything that you all have been working with the Water Supply Committee? Because I know we get a ton of calls in the selectman's office about why can so-and-so water their lawn, and it usually is because they have a well.
So first, I should say that the restrictions, the water restrictions, do not apply to anyone who is using their private well for their irrigation system. And I do know that the state, through their Water Management Act regulations, is addressing that issue. And, consideration to how do you deal with that for more than just Hingham and Hull. Across the state, that question comes up. So I think there's more to come with the the new Water Management Act regulations.
And it's interesting because this comes up every year.
Yes.
With the wells and also the fields. We have a number of our sports fields that are watered by wells. And people ask. Let's see. Well, that was the one. Why are the restrictions being implemented earlier this year than in prior years,
So water.
potentially?
Yeah, so water usage starts to increase in May as people start doing more outside watering. So by calling for the restrictions early in May, we think it allows people to do better planning for their lawns and gardens before the hot summer months. The state standard for calling for restrictions is May 1. I believe it's part of the new Water Management Act regulations. The regulations at least recommend a May 1 start date. Also, because there's outside watering, by calling them early in May or implementing them early in May, our chance of staying under that annual limit, the registration limit, is greater because we're having them in place in a month that people are doing watering.
Where could people, if they're interested, find information about garden care and lawn care?
We're pointing, we have a partnership with greenscapes.org. So www.greenscapes.org. It's a great organization. It's run through the North and South the North and South River Watershed Association. And they really give, it's one thing to tell folks when you can and can't water, but it's important to give them resources, how I can better care for my lawn. The recommendation is twice a week is ample, and you want to let the roots grow deeper. And by watering them only twice at the most, you're allowing that to happen. They also talk, you can download a whole newsletter from their website. They talk about durable plants and flowers that can enable you to grow a beautiful garden and lawn with less water.
Yeah, that's the organization that had a number of seminars, I believe, that you all participated in.
We do the education program through the Water All Around You program at the 5th grade level and through the schools, but they also do a number of seminars throughout the South Shore. They just did a garden day, a green day in March in Scituate at the Kennedy Gardens, I believe it's
Oh.
called. So they do a number of things in the area, and they have a lot of helpful hints. And there are already helpful hints on the Aquarian website as well as on our FAQ.
Excellent. Last year, there were problems with getting the water into the treatment plant. Can you go back and kind of bring everybody forward? Because I hear different in the public. I hear different versions of what happened, so I always have to tell people, well, that's not quite right. Why don't you tell us what happened last year and then the steps you all have taken to make sure it doesn't happen again this year? Because I think you've done some really good work there.
Yeah, so last year, the difficulty was getting water from our sources to the treatment plant. So we have 9 active wells in the reservoir. And at each of the wells, there is a pump. And at the reservoir, there's a pump station with 3 pumps in it. And the water is pumped from each of the sources to the treatment plant through a piping network. All of that infrastructure, the wells, the reservoir, their pumps, and the piping, we call that our raw water system. And we call it raw water because until the water gets to the treatment plant and is treated, the industry calls it raw. So we have, over the past year, invested substantially in that system to ensure that in this upcoming summer, we have enough capacity to meet peak day demands. And that has included new equipment at 3 of our wells, including larger pumps. It's new equipment at the pump station at our reservoir to increase the pumping capacity. We're also reactivating and putting new equipment in at one of our wells that was taken out of service about in 2008, 2009. So we're investing a lot of money into that raw water infrastructure. Now, while we've done all that, we still have to abide by that annual limit.
Yeah.
And that is why we're calling for the restrictions again this year.
And that's, if people leave with one thing from this show, is that we do have a limit to the amount of water we can withdraw on a daily basis, and it's a running average across the year. However, the highest use of water is during the summer, where everybody wants a garden or a nice lawn or swimming pools. So if you take one thing away from here, it's not only the drought conditions, but it's the regulatory limit that we live under. Let's switch topics a little bit. How's the unaccounted water coming?
So unaccounted for water, just so I can explain what that
Please
that
do
term
that,
means.
yes.
We measure the amount of water using flow meters. We measure the amount of water that's leaving our treatment plant. And then every home and every business in the community has a meter as well. So we know how much water is leaving our facility, and we know how much water is going into each home. The difference between those 2 numbers is called non-revenue water. There's a portion of that non-revenue water that we can account for. And that's when we have a water main break. We estimate how much water has escaped from the pipe, and so that we can account for. So we subtract that from that non-revenue water number, and the remaining amount is unaccounted for water. We can't account for where it's gone. And that number for 2014 is in the low 20%. Now, that's relatively high for the industry. And so what we did in spring 2013 is we did what's called a water audit, and we used an industry standard approach to water audits really created by the American Water Works Association. And what the water audit does is it helps you evaluate all of the sources of unaccounted for water. Unaccounted for water can come from usage of hydrants, whether it's for firefighting or filling street sweepers, or people stealing water from hydrants. If we don't have information for how much water was used from a hydrant, it's unaccounted for. There also can be metering issues, whether it's our meters at the facility or meters at people's homes. And there's a variety of other causes of unaccounted for water. And through that audit, the data was telling us that there's a high likelihood that there was relatively high leakage in the system. So what we have done, I think most importantly, is we've started doing leak detection each month in the Hingham Hall system. And just to compare it to what the industry standard is, the state conservation standards, I believe, call for water utilities to do leak detection once every 2 years.
Oh.
So we're doing it every month. I think it's extremely important to do it. We started that in October of last year. And through October, November, and December, we found a lot of leaks. We fixed them immediately. Some of the leaks are on our water mains. Some of them are on the service lines to the customers' homes. And some of them are on hydrants. So we have worked with both Hingham and Hull on getting those hydrant issues addressed. And what we saw in November and December is that our production, so the amount of water that we were producing at the plant and putting into the system, was about 8% less than the average of the previous 2 years.
That's encouraging.
So, yeah, that was very encouraging. It's a good sign that we were getting ahead of the problem. Going back to our 2014 number, though, as I said, it's in the low 20%. We had November and December were 2 months where we think we've got things really right with leak detection and reducing the amount of leakage. But the 2014 number is 12 months worth of data. So there's 2.5 months of that were reflective of the leak detection efforts, but about 10 months of data was not reflective of that. So we are expecting to see better numbers in this upcoming year. And we think it's very important to address that issue.
Which would be terrific, because then that gives us a little bit of a buffer, again, bumping up against that 3.5 million gallons a day.
Yes. Yeah.
And that would be most helpful.
Yes.
Tell us about your open house day. I might as well, you're here, I'm going to let you plug it.
Pitch.
Yep,
So our open
plug
house
it.
is on Saturday, thank you, May 9th, from 9:30 in the morning until noon. And we're going to have a variety of educational opportunities for both adults and children. Tours of the plant, 15 to 20-minute tours of the plant. We'll have Holly Hill Farms there with a demonstration on composting, actually, and how that can reduce how compost retains water and then you use less water to grow your garden. So a lot of helpful hints. We have the rain barrel distribution there, and we're going to have other organizations that are distributing information, refreshments. So I encourage you to stop in. It's a great opportunity if you've never seen the plant to see it.
And I would encourage everybody also to stop in as we continue the journey through the water company projects. I'm glad you mentioned the open house, because I didn't even know about it. So now we've got it out on TV.
That's right.
Well, we're almost coming to the close. I really want to thank the two of you so much. I always enjoy working with you. And I appreciate also your work with the Water Supply Committee, which we reconstituted. And I know they're doing some great work with you. So, one last question I forgot. What is going to be your objective on unaccounted water?
Well, the state would like all water utilities to have an unaccounted for water less than 10%. So that is the ultimate target.
Excellent, excellent. Now, I'm going to make one more pitch. Town meeting. Please read your warrant. There are some excellent warrant articles in there. There are some that's going to take you a while to read, so come prepared to town meeting. We may actually have a one-night town meeting, and I hope I'm not jinxing it by suggesting that. It's a smaller warrant this year. Again, we can thank Mother Nature for that. So with that, I'll thank you for listening today. I'll thank my guests,
Well, thank
John
you, Irma.
Walsh and Ronit Goldstein. And join us next time for On the Issues.